So just kind of to summarize, you'll get that lipid panel if you want to do a simple calculation, the total minus HDL, or check an ApoB level. Either way, you would in almost every situation as it relates to your cardiovascular risk, prefer that number to be lower for longer rather than higher over that period of time.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you're going to get people who say, oh, I switched to the carnivore diet or I switched to a ketogenic diet or whatever. And my, cholesterol, non HDL cholesterol jumped up to whatever, some higher number. Right. And they've been doing it for a year or 2 years, 3 years, even 5 years. Right. And they're like, and look at me, no heart problems. And it's like, well, this is all a probability thing.
Yeah.
And so as time goes on, the probability continues to increase that you will have heart disease because of this atherogenic load, from the non-HDL cholesterol, from the ApoB containing elements in the blood. And so if you got to choose, do I want this excess exposure or not? You would say no. I mean, that's the logical conclusion. It doesn't mean that everybody with high sort of, atherogenic load is, definitively going to have heart disease. That's not the way human biology works, right? But as far as predicting who's at risk and who's likely to benefit from, reducing exposure, I mean, that's just how it goes. It's not like everybody who smokes doesn't get lung cancer. It doesn't mean that smoking doesn't cause lung cancer. Like,
Yeah.
pretty confident that that's the case,
Yeah, and I can see scenarios where somebody might have obesity and insulin resistance and diabetes, and they might radically overhaul their diet and go on carnivore, for example, and as a result lose, 20% of their body weight and improve their blood sugar, improve their insulin resistance, get their waist measurement down into healthy ranges. Yet maybe through that process, as a result of the foods that they were eating before and what they shifted to, maybe their lipids do start to look a bit worse. And so they might, come back and say, well, what do you say? What do you say to that? And I'm like, well, it's phenomenal that you achieve the weight loss and improve the insulin resistance, blood sugar, all that is doing you huge, huge, huge favors, maybe even bigger favors, as far as reducing your heart disease risk in comparison to the blood cholesterol increases. Yet the same thing would apply where if I had to choose between having the higher blood lipid levels in that end state that you've achieved of relative leanness, if I could choose between them being higher versus lower, I would choose them to be lower because that's another risk variable that is still impacting your risk. And there are ways to do that. You don't necessarily need to live with chronically high blood lipid levels. There are lots of ways to manage that from a diet, lifestyle, and pharmacologic or medication lens so that you don't have to necessarily accept that risk.